Imagine the holiest morning of the year, Christmas, 1858, shattered by the clink of silver coins trading a baby's soul. In the shadow of tobacco leaves whispering secrets of sin, a mother's heart breaks, and heaven itself demands retribution. What if divine justice came not with angels, but with flames that devoured the wicked? The frost clung to the earth like a shroud of forgotten sins, blanketing the rolling hills of central North Carolina in a crystalline veil that sparkled under the pale dawnlight. It was Christmas morning, 1858, a day meant for redemption and rebirth, yet poisoned by the bitter tang of betrayal. The air carried the faint scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys, mingling with the earthy musk of dormant tobacco fields that stretched endlessly, their skeletal stalks standing sentinel like ghosts of harvests past. In this forsaken corner of Randolph County, where the Piedmont's gentle undulations hid layers of buried anguish, a transaction unfolded not in the warmth of a family hearth, but in the cold calculus of human commerce. A child, innocent as the Christ child himself, was bartered away like chattel. Her mother, a woman forged in the fires of endurance, bore witness. And before the stars could reclaim the sky, the Harrove Estate, symbol of earthly greed and spiritual decay, would be reduced to smoldering ruins, its iron gates warped by a blaze that seemed to roar with the fury of Old Testament wrath. Official records, those brittle parchments yellowed by time and deliberate omission, speak of a faulty lantern sparking the inferno. But whispers among the survivors, passed down through generations like forbidden psalms, tell a truer tale, one of Ruth, an enslaved woman whose maternal bond was severed by silver pieces echoing Judas's betrayal. This fire wasn't mere accident, it was a reckoning, a divine inferno purging the plantation's sins of avarice, cruelty, and the commodification of souls. For over 160 years, the story has languished in dusty courthouse vaults and sealed family trunks, guarded by descendants who feared the light of truth. Yet here, in the quiet unraveling of history, we exhume it not as dry facts, but as a living, breathing saga of human frailty and celestial justice. Picture the scene, the sun barely cresting the horizon, its rays filtering through bare oak branches like hesitant fingers of judgment. The Harrove Estate loomed at the heart of it all, a sprawling dominion of 400 acres where tobacco reigned supreme, its leaves once green and vibrant now withered husks awaiting spring's false promise of renewal. Founded in 1791 by Colonel William Harrove, a Revolutionary War veteran whose land grant was blood payment for battles fought under banners of liberty, ironic, given the chains he forged upon it. The colonel, a stoic figure with calloused hands and a gaze as unyielding as granite, had erected the main house with pragmatic austerity, thick brick walls to defy the seasons, narrow windows like suspicious eyes peering out at the world. No ornate columns or gilded facades here, this was a fortress of profit, not vanity. He'd sown his first tobacco seeds in 1792, imported from Virginia's fertile soils, and watched them thrive under the relentless sun. By harvest, the profits flowed like communion wine, intoxicating him with visions of legacy. Generations later, his grandson Edmund Harrove inherited this empire in 1852, transforming it into a meticulously orchestrated machine of exploitation. At 34, Edmund was a man of ledgers and logic, schooled in law at the University of North Carolina but drawn back to the soil by the siren call of inheritance. His study was a sanctum of order, polished oak desk, shelves groaning under leather-bound volumes tracking every asset down to the last nail in the barns. The estate boasted 3 cavernous tobacco barns, their rafters hung with curing leaves that filled the air with a pungent, almost medicinal haze, a 12-room main house with creaking hardwood floors and fireplaces that crackled like accusing whispers, a detached kitchen where pots clanged in rhythmic servitude, stables echoing with the soft whinnies of horses, a smokehouse redolent of hickory and salted meats, a blacksmith's forge hammering out tools of toil, a carpenter's workshop splintered with shavings, and, most tellingly, the quarter's 12 cramped cabins huddled to the south like outcasts, housing the 43 souls whose labor fueled it all. Annually, 20,000 pounds of tobacco emerged from this land, bundled and shipped to Richmond's bustling ports, then across the Atlantic to European markets where gentlemen puffed pipes in ignorance of the human cost. The layout was geometric precision, east to the vast fields, where rows of tobacco plants marched in regimented lines, their broad leaves rustling like pages in a book of grievances, west to gardens bursting with vegetables, orchards heavy with apples that symbolized forbidden knowledge, north to barns and workshops buzzing with activity, south to the quarters, divided by a dusty road that served as a chasm between masters and the mastered. Edmund himself cut a figure of detached authority, tall, with sharp features framed by sideburns, his eyes a steely gray that reflected the winter skies. He wasn't overtly sadistic,
not like some planters whose whips sang daily anthems of terror.
No, his cruelty was subtler, woven into the fabric of efficiency. He delegated floggings to his overseer, Cyrus Dalton, a burly man with a scarred face and a voice like grinding gravel, who wielded the lash with mechanical indifference. Edmund provided rations, cornmeal, pork fat, coarse cloth, but exacted fees for extras, turning survival into a ledger entry. Christmas offered a hollow reprieve, a day free from labor, permission for small gardens behind cabins where enslaved hands coaxed life from exhausted soil.
Yet even here, spiritual symbolism lurked, the gardens as Edenic remnants in a fallen world, tiny acts of creation amid destruction.
His wife, Caroline, 28 and fragile as porcelain, hailed from Charleston's merchant elite.
Her pallor spoke of indoor confinement, her nerves frayed by childbirth and the isolation of plantation life.
She cloistered herself. Upstairs, surrounded by novels that transported her to worlds without the stench of tobacco or the echoes of distant cries. Letters to her sisters in South Carolina were her lifelines, inked with longing under the soft glow of oil lamps. Their sons, William, 7, and James, 5, roamed under the watchful eye of Bess, an elderly enslaved woman in her 60s, her gray hair a crown of wisdom, her stooped frame belying a mind sharp as a scythe. Bess had nursed Edmund through infancy, now repeating the cycle with his heirs, sleeping in an alcove off the kitchen where night sounds, owls hooting like omens, children stirring, kept her vigilant. Into this tapestry of temporal power wove Ruth's thread, born in spring 1834 amid the estate's blooming dogwoods, symbols of resurrection tainted by bondage. Her mother, Dinah, not Dinah, as some misremember, arrived in the 1820s from Fayetteville's auction blocks, her culinary prowess elevating her to the kitchen, a position of relative privilege, where aromas of fresh-baked bread in simmering stews masked the underlying bitterness. Dinah's hands, deft and flour-dusted, crafted pastries that graced Caroline's table during her pregnancies, when nausea confined her to bed. Ruth, shadowing her mother, absorbed the rhythms, the sizzle of fat in iron skillets, the knead of dough like a prayer for sustenance. She learned reading surreptitiously, peering over the Harrove children's shoulders during lessons, decoding letters that formed words of power, freedom, justice, God. At 11, tragedy struck like a biblical plague. Dinah succumbed to a raging fever, likely typhoid, her body convulsing in the humid summer heat. The doctor, summoned too late, muttered diagnoses over her cooling form before she was interred in the unmarked cemetery behind the quarters, a field of crosses weathered by rain, where ancestors slumbered without epitaphs.
Ruth's world shattered, relocated to the fields, her young back bent under the sun's unmerciful gaze. Hands once
clean now blistered and sap-stained, she hauled water in heavy buckets that sloshed like tears, yanked weeds that choked the soil like sins, collected leaves that crinkled underfoot. By 14, full days in the rows forged her into resilience incarnate, her muscles corded, her spirit tempered. Then came Samuel at 17, a towering presence from Virginia's plantations, sold south at 15 and acquired by Edmund in 1850 with others for the barns. Broad-shouldered, with skin like polished ebony and eyes deep as wells of sorrow, he exuded quiet authority. His words, sparse but weighted, commanded respect. Their meeting by the creek eastern boundary of the estate, where waters murmured secrets of escape, sparked like divine ordnance. Ruth, laundering linens in the cool flow, sleeves rolled to reveal arms scarred by labor, Samuel, bucket in hand, pausing to utter a simple greeting that blossomed into connection. Their union in spring 1852 defied legal bonds, a ceremony under the stars with Jacob, a former preacher enslaved, invoking blessings from a tattered Bible. No rings, no papers, just vows exchanged before witnesses, followed by a feast, pilfered chicken roasted over open flames, cornbread crumbling warm, greens stewed tender, a fiddle's melody dancing like fireflies. Samuel joined Ruth in her cabin, dirt floor compacted by countless footsteps, single window admitting slivers of light, plank bed with straw mattress that rustled like whispers, a rough-hewn table, stools scarred by use, fireplace where embers glowed like embers of hope. Life's cadence emerged, dawn to dusk toil in fields where heat shimmered like mirages of liberty, evenings by the hearth where Samuel whittled wood into utilitarian art, spoons curved gracefully, bowls hollowed deep, toys that evoked whimsy. Ruth mended fabrics, weaving rugs from scraps, their conversations laced with dreams unspoken. Sundays by the creek, feet dangling in currents that symbolized Jordan's crossing, watching sunsets paint the sky. In hues of blood and gold, reminders of sacrifice and promise. Lily's arrival in March 1857 amplified this fragile Eden. Born on a stormy night, rain pattering the roof like impatient fingers, Ruth labored with Samuel's steady presence, his cloth cooling her brow, his hand anchoring hers through waves of agony. The infant's first cry pierced the darkness, a wail of defiance. Wrapped in threadbare cloth, Lily's dark eyes, mirrors of Ruth's, gazed upward, igniting a maternal ferocity akin to Mary's vigil at the manger, yet shadowed by the cross of slavery. Healthy and vibrant, she giggled at 6 months, toddled at 1, her broad forehead echoing Samuel's lineage. Ruth slung her in fields, Lily napping in shade while tobacco leaves swayed like judgmental elders. Evenings brought lullabies, ancestral melodies of rivers flowing to freedom, roads winding to redemption. Samuel's carvings animated for her delight, wooden horse galloping imaginary plains, bird soaring unbound skies, rabbit hopping toward hidden burrows. His stories, murmured softly, painted utopias, vast prairies where souls roamed free, no overseer's shadow, no chains clanking like demonic laughter. In this cabin, amid oppression's grip, flickered a light of familial grace, a testament to human spirit's defiance against spiritual desolation. But ledgers, those cold arbiters of fate, foretold doom. The 1857 crop faltered, April's frost nipped seedlings like Satan's breath, summer's drought withered stalks to brittle specters. Harvest yielded scant, plunging Edmund into debt's abyss, to a Greensboro merchant whose credit now demanded repayment. Options dwindled, sell land? Prices plummeted post-1857 panic. Loan? Banks shunned planters like lepers. Enter Josiah Trent in November, a Richmond trader whose circuit peddled flesh like merchandise. Portly, bearded, eyes glacial as winter ponds, he arrived in finery, wool coat tailored sharp, boots gleaming, gold chain ticking time's merciless march. Their parley in the study stretched 2 hours, air thick with cigar smoke curling like serpents. Ledgers splayed, Trent's pricing humans by age, gender, hue, Edmund's cataloging his property. Bargaining ensued, Trent coveted young field hands for cotton's voracious south. Edmund balked, then conceded 3 men at $800 apiece. Insufficient. Trent's query slithered, any children? Light-skinned? The words hung, pregnant with profanity. Light ones fetched premiums in Richmond, girls molded into domestic servitude, their youth malleable as clay. 200 for healthy, Trent offered, 250 if fair. Edmund's finger traced names, pausing at Lily, born 1857, Ruth and Samuel's daughter. Agreement sealed, Trent departed with a roster, 3 men, 1 child. Ruth's world teetered, unaware. Christmas dawned frigid, fog veiling fields like a funeral pall, frost crunching under boots like breaking bones. No labor today, a grudging gift. Quarters stirred with subdued communion, shared scraps, warmth huddled against chill. Ruth roused early, Lily feverish from teething, her cries echoing night's vigil. Rocking her by embers, Ruth hummed ancient tunes, rivers as baptismal waters, roads as paths to salvation, suns eternal as God's mercy. Samuel summoned pre-dawn to the main house for menial tasks, furniture shifted for Edmund's evening soiree. Promised midday return. Ruth cradled Lily, the babe's fist clutching her finger like a lifeline, eyes drooping in trust. Then, the knock ominous as judgment's gavel. Ruth's pulse thrummed, visitors on Christmas bode ill. Door creaked open, Edmund, impassive, Trent lurking behind, aura reeking of brimstone. Breath seized, Ruth retreated, Lily clutched tight. The child's been sold, Edmund intoned, voice devoid of humanity, eyes averted like pilot washing hands. Trent takes her to Richmond this afternoon. No, Ruth whispered, a plea to heaven itself. Lily whimpered, sensing storm. Edmund met her gaze, unyielding. It's done. In that moment, the air thickened with spiritual portent, the sale not mere transaction, but desecration of motherhood's sacred bond, inviting divine fury. The plantation, built on sands of injustice, trembled on the brink of apocalypse. Ruth's soul, once resilient, now ignited with a flame that would consume all in its path, a burning bush of vengeance, heralding redemption through ruin. Pause for dramatic effect, ambient sounds of crackling fire and distant bells fading out. But to understand the depths of this betrayal, we must delve deeper into the spiritual undercurrents that wove through Ruth's life, the biblical echoes that amplified her anguish. Slavery, that institution of man-made hell, twisted the scriptures themselves, planters quoting Ephesians on obedience while ignoring Exodus's cries for liberation. Ruth, though illiterate in form, carried the word in her heart, passed through oral traditions like manna in the wilderness. Her mother's songs weren't mere melodies, they were psalms of deliverance, invoking the Red Sea's parting, the walls of Jericho tumbling. As Lily was torn from her arms that morning, Trent's rough hands prying the child away amid her screams that pierced like angelic trumpets, Ruth felt the weight of Golgotha. The baby's cries reverberated across the quarters, awakening dormant rage in others who watched in silenced horror. Samuel, returning to chaos, found his family fractured, his broad frame slumped, eyes brimming with unshed tears that mirrored the flood of Noah. The transaction's details unfolded in cinematic horror, Trent counting silver coins on the cabin's table, their clink echoing like 30 pieces of betrayal. Edmund overseeing, his ledger updated with a flourish, profit restoring his balance while shattering souls. Lily, bundled in a coarse sack like a lamb to slaughter, her tiny form wriggling in protest. Yet amid despair, seeds of retribution sprouted.
Ruth's mind raced through memories, Dinah's deathbed whispers of ancestral spirits guarding the oppressed, Samuel's tales of free lands as promised Canaan.
The estate's opulence mocked her, the main house's glowing windows promising warmth denied, Caroline's distant silhouette a ghost of privilege.
As afternoon waned, Trent's wagon rattled away, Lily's wails fading into the mist like a receding lamentation.
Ruth collapsed in the cabin, dirt floor absorbing her sobs.
Samuel held her, their embrace a fortress against encroaching darkness.
But within her, a storm brewed, not of flesh, but spirit. The Bible's tales of fire, Sodom's destruction, Elijah's chariot, whispered possibilities.
Was this divine test? Or call to action? The estate prepared for festivity, lanterns lit in the main house, aromas of roast turkey and pies wafting, laughter of guests contrasting the quarter's mourning.
Bess, wise elder, slipped to Ruth's door with hushed counsel, "Child, the Lord sees.
Vengeance is his."
Her words, laced with scripture, ignited embers.
Night fell, stars pricking the sky like watchful eyes of providence. Ruth rose, movements deliberate, a vessel of wrath.
She wandered the grounds, senses heightened, crunch of frost, hoot of owls as omens, wind sighing through barns like spirits' unrest.
The fire's origin? Not lantern, but deliberate spark. Ruth's hand, guided by invisible force, touching flame to tinder in the tobacco barns.
Dry leaves ignited swiftly, flames leaping like avenging angels, consuming structures symbolizing greed.
Heat intensified, melting iron gates as prophesied furnaces. As blaze spread, chaos ensued, shouts piercing night, buckets chain formed in vain.
Edmund's face, illuminated by inferno, twisted in realization, his empire crumbling like Babel's tower.
Survivors fled, quarters emptying into fields.
Ruth and Samuel vanished into shadows, perhaps toward the creek's symbolic waters, baptism into freedom. The dawn of December 26 revealed desolation, ash drifting like manna turned bitter, bones of buildings stark against scorched earth. Inquiry blamed accident, but whispers knew Ruth's act, a mosaic plague upon Pharaoh's house. This tale, rooted in history's dark soil, resonates with eternal themes: guilt's burden, sin's wage, redemption's price.
In Ruth's fury, we see not villainy, but reflection. How far must one be pushed before heaven intervenes?
The cabin's door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like the ceiling of a tomb, leaving Ruth crumpled on the dirt floor, her body racked by sobs that seemed to rise from the depths of her soul. The air inside was thick with the residue of despair, the faint metallic tang of fierce sweat, the lingering warmth from the hearth now mocking her chilled bones. Outside, the Christmas morning frost glittered mockingly under a sun that dared to shine indifferently, its rays piercing through the single grimy window like judgmental spears from on high. Lily's cries, those piercing wails that had shredded the silence, faded into the distance, carried away on the creak of wagon wheels and the clip-clop of horses' hooves crunching over frozen earth. Each retreating sound was a nail driven deeper into Ruth's heart, a crucifixion of motherhood on this holiest of days. The confrontation had unfolded in a blur of brutality, a scene straight from the annals of human depravity, laced with spiritual irony. Ruth, her arms a protective cradle around Lily's tiny form, had faced Edmund Harrove and Josiah Trent like a lamb before wolves in shepherd's clothing. Harrove's words, "The child's been sold," hung in the air like a profane decree, his voice devoid of tremor, his eyes avoiding hers as if gazing upon a ledger entry rather than a living soul. Trent, the traitor, loomed large, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed the cabin's meager light, his face a mask of practiced indifference, etched with the lines of countless such transactions. "Hand her over," he'd growled, his tone flat, mechanical, as if bartering for livestock rather than severing the divine bond between mother and child. Ruth's pleas had spilled forth like desperate prayers to a deaf deity. "Please, she's just a baby."
"Not even 2.
Her voice cracked, infused with the raw vulnerability of Eve lamenting her expulsion from Eden. But Trent's response was a serpent's hiss: "She'll fetch good in Richmond.
Light-skinned ones do. Better life, house servant, sewing, cooking."
The words twisted like thorns, promising a gilded cage while ignoring the soul's imprisonment.
Harrove's retort sealed the blasphemy: "She's my property. I need the money." Property. The term reverberated, a perversion of Genesis's stewardship over creation, reducing God's image-bearer to chattel.
In that moment, Ruth's gaze pierced Harrove's facade, the fine wool coat tailored in Charleston, boots polished to a sheen that reflected his unearned privilege, hands unmarred by labor, gold watch chain glinting like Judas's ill-gotten silver. "On Christmas," she whispered, her voice trembling with accusation, invoking the Nativity's miracle now desecrated by this modern Herod's decree. Harrove offered no reply, his silence a void where remorse should have dwelled. The seizure was swift, a violent rupture. Trent lunged, his meaty hands prying Lily free with the efficiency of a reaper harvesting souls. The baby's scream erupted, a high, keening wail that sliced through the cabin like the cry of the innocents in Bethlehem. Ruth surged forward, claws extended in primal defense, but Harrove intercepted, his grip iron on her arm, twisting it behind her back until she buckled to her knees. Pain shot through her like divine lightning, yet it paled against the agony of separation. Trent vanished through the door, Lily's flailing limbs a blur against his bulk.
Ruth's scream tore from her core, a lamentation echoing the wails of Rachel weeping for her children.
It built in waves, raw and unrelenting, until her throat burned like brimstone. Harrove released her, stepping back as if from a leper, his parting words a cold epitaph: "You'll get over it." The door closed, entombing her in solitude. Hours blurred into a haze of grief.
The cabin's walls, rough-hewn logs scarred by years of occupancy, seemed to close in, whispering accusations of powerlessness.
The dirt floor, compacted by generations of enslaved feet, absorbed her tears like an indifferent altar. Samuel's return shattered the stasis. He found her there, a broken vessel, and knelt without words, his strong arms enveloping her in silent communion. His presence was a balm, yet the wound gaped too wide. As sobs subsided, a transformation stirred within Ruth, a hardening, like clay fired in affliction's kiln. Something unbreakable forged in her spirit, a resolve born of Job's endurance, tempered by the promise of vengeance in the Psalms. Twilight descended, the sun dipping below the horizon in a blaze of crimson and gold, symbolic of the blood shed and the fire to come. The temperature plummeted, frost reclaiming the earth like sin reclaiming the soul. Ruth rose, her movements deliberate, infused with purpose. She stepped from the cabin, the cold air biting her skin like penance. Samuel shadowed her, concern etching his features, but she halted him with a quiet command: "Don't follow." Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of prophecy, stopping him in his tracks. She veered not to the main house's grand entrance, but to the kitchen, a detached edifice linked by a covered walkway, its hearth eternally aglow in winter's grip. The flames danced within, casting flickering shadows on the stone floor, illuminating pots and pans hung like instruments of daily martyrdom. Ruth paused at the threshold, the heat washing over her like a baptism of fire. Memories flooded, her mother Dinah, toiling here for 2 decades, her hands kneading dough with rhythmic grace, infusing meals with love unseen by those she served. Dinah, who had whispered tales of ancestral strength, of spirits watching over the oppressed, now a ghost in this space of subjugation. Thoughts cascaded, Lily's laughter, a melody of innocence, as Samuel animated wooden carvings, rabbits hopping, birds fluttering, in their humble abode. The child's grasp that morning, fingers clutching void as Trent bore her away. And Harrove, his glacial stare, ledgers chronicling. Lives as debits, watch chain ticking away stolen moments. "You'll get over it," he'd said, equating maternal loss to a misplaced trinket. The words ignited fury, a righteous anger akin to Moses before Pharaoh. Ruth's hand extended, grasping a smoldering log from the hearth. Flames licked her skin, blistering flesh in sacrificial pain, yet she held firm, a martyr embracing her cross. She traversed the walkway, embers trailing like sparks of divine wrath, entering the main house unchallenged. First, the study, sanctum of Harrove's empire, where ink had sealed Lily's fate. She placed the log atop the open ledger, flames devouring pages in hungry leaps. Names, catalogues of bondage, curled and blackened, a symbolic liberation of souls from paper chains. Unmoved, she proceeded, parlor, where Caroline's imported rugs and ornate chairs bespoke ill-gotten luxury. She ignited curtains, fabric blooming into inferno. Dining room, sitting room, hallway each fed to the blaze, smoke billowing like incense from a profane altar. By the front door, the lower floor roared with life, flames climbing walls like avenging vines. Ruth emerged into the night, standing sentinel in the yard, the cold contrasting the growing heat at her back. Shouts erupted, alarms of discovery, as figures scrambled in silhouette against the glow. She remained rooted, hands seared, and weeping blood, witnessing the conflagration. The fire, no mere accident, was a purgatory unleashed, consuming the edifice of exploitation, its heat a foretaste of eternal judgment. Hours it raged, flames vaulting 30 feet, illuminating the Piedmont's expanse like a beacon of reckoning. Neighbors converged, drawn by the distant blaze, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Bucket brigades formed instinctively, water sloshing in futile defiance against the inferno's might. The main house succumbed, walls groaning before collapsing inward, leaving the chimney a solitary sentinel, cracked and soot-stained. The Harrove's escape was frantic, Caroline leaping from a second-story window, ankle shattering on impact, her scream merging with the crackle. Boys lowered by Edmund's desperate hands, caught by Bess's steady arms, the elderly woman, ever the guardian, her gray hair wild in the firelight. Edmund last, nightshirt singed, face smudged, coughing smoke like expelled demons. They clustered in the yard, blankets from quarters draped over shivering forms. William wept openly, tears streaking soot. James stared transfixed, eyes reflecting the dance of destruction. Caroline, pallid and sweating, her twisted ankle a physical echo of inner torment. Enslaved folk surged from quarters, some aiding the futile quench, others salvaging from outbuildings, smokehouse aromas mingling with acrid burn, stables whinnying in panic. The kitchen ignited at midnight, walkway a conduit of doom, a tobacco barn caught errant sparks, its dried leaves fueling a secondary blaze. Dawn broke on December 26, revealing desolation, ash swirling like bitter snow, ruins steaming in the chill. Iron gates at the entrance warped grotesquely, scrollwork melted into abstract forms, symbols of twisted justice. Ruth sat amid the wreckage, dress charred, hands blistered monuments to her deed. Cyrus Dalton seized her roughly, her lack of resistance eerie. Samuel lunged, rebuffed by Dalton's shove, "Stay back." Ruth's gaze met Samuel's once dry, resolute, a silent farewell before averting. Confined to a barn, she awaited fate. Inquiry commenced 2 days hence, Sheriff Thomas Garrett, deputy, clerk arriving on horseback, notebooks ready. Harrove's testimony, awakened by smoke and screams, family evacuated, suspected lantern or spark. Pressed, he conceded Ruth's proximity to the kitchen, linking to the incident Lily's sale, her mother's distress. Upset enough to arson? Garrett probed. Harrove evaded, "I don't know her mind." Ruth's interview in the barn, bandaged hands from Bess's mercy, she sat vacant-eyed. "Did you set it?" No reply. "Confess for leniency." Her query, "Will you hang me?" Garrett shifted, "Judge decides." Ruth's retort, "Then words matter not." Eyes hollow, voice hoarse from lament. Inquiry closed inconclusive, no direct proof, only suspicion. Harrove forewent trial, fearing exposure, debts, ledgers, Christmas sale scrutinized in papers. Better silence than scandal. Instead, quiet disposal. Marcus Finch, Charleston broker in difficult cases, arrived weeks later. $150 for Ruth, less than Lily's price, a final indignity. Late January's chill mirrored her departure, wagon-bound, expressionless, no backward glance. Samuel watched, fists clenched, jaw set, no tears, just vigil until dust obscured her. That night, he unearthed Lily's wooden rabbit, fingers tracing its form, evoking lost laughter. Wrapped, buried under floorboards, cradle site a relic interred, symbol of buried dreams. Harrove's aftermath, rebuild on borrowed funds, estate teetering by 1860. New house austere, kitchen distant with stone safeguards.
Obsession gripped, locks, shutters, water buckets, alarm bell, bedside rifle. Sleep eluded, haunted by flames.
Caroline's limp endured, but fire phobia consumed, candles banished, hearts monitored, nightmares of engulfment. Her world shrank to shadowed rooms, a prisoner of trauma.
The estate's spiritual scar lingered, whispers of divine retribution, Ruth as avenging angel. Fields yielded poorly, as if cursed, workers spoke of ghosts in the ruins.
Biblical echoes abounded, fire as purification, loss as judgment on greed. Ruth's legacy, a chilling testament to endurance's limit, where maternal love, provoked, summons apocalypse. In history's undercurrents, her act resonates, guilt's inexorable tide, sin's harvest, redemption through ruin. The aftermath of that fateful Christmas night in 1858 lingered like a perpetual shadow over the Harrove Estate, a spectral pall that seeped into every crevice of the land and its inhabitants. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with the acrid residue of burned wood and unspoken regrets, as if the fire had scorched not just timber and stone, but the very soul of the place.
Frosty mornings gave way to springs that bloomed reluctantly, the tobacco fields yielding crops tainted by an invisible blight, leaves curling prematurely, as though recoiling from the memory of flames.
The estate, once a bastion of prosperity built on the backs of the enslaved, now stood as a monument to hubris, its rebuilt structures mere facades masking deeper decay. Spiritual undertones wove through the narrative like threads from a biblical tapestry, the fire as a modern Sodom's destruction, Ruth's act a echo of Samson's final pull on the pillars, bringing down the house of the oppressor even at personal cost. Caroline Harrove, once a delicate figure of southern refinement, became a prisoner of her own terror, her fragile psyche fractured by the inferno's embrace. She forbade candles entirely, their flickering wicks evoking too vividly the hungry blaze that had nearly claimed her family. Only oil lamps were permitted, and even those burned solely in occupied rooms, their light dim and controlled, casting long shadows that danced like accusatory fingers across the walls. The boys, William and James, were barred from the hearth's warmth. Caroline's eyes would widen in panic at the mere sight of them nearing its glow, her voice sharp with warnings of unseen dangers. Nightmares plagued her, wrenching her from sleep with screams that pierced the quiet house. She swore she smelled smoke, thick and choking, though the chimneys stood cold and the air clear. By 1861, she withdrew completely, confining herself to the upstairs bedroom, its windows shuttered against the world. There, she pored over the same dog-eared novels, their pages yellowed like forgotten confessions, and penned letters to her Charleston sisters, missives filled with veiled pleas for escape, never sealed or sent, stacking like unheeded prayers on her desk. Her interactions with Edmund dwindled to terse inquiries about locks bolted tight or buckets brimming with water, her gaze haunted, as if peering into an abyss where divine judgment loomed. The children bore the fire's invisible scars, growing in its elongated shadow like saplings twisted by storm. William, at 7 the elder, retreated into silence, his once bright eyes dulled by nocturnal visions of roaring flames that consumed his dreams. He'd bolt upright in the dark, tears streaming, whispering of heat that singed his skin even in slumber, a psychological echo of hellfire, symbolizing inherited guilt for sins not his own. James, 5 and impressionable, developed a stutter that clung like a curse, his words halting as if choked by smoke, never fully exorcised despite years of futile remedies. Their play was subdued, confined to sunlit corners far from any spark, their laughter rare and fleeting, as though the estate's spiritual malaise had siphoned their joy. Among the enslaved, the tale circulated in hushed tones, shared around flickering campfires in the quarters when Overseer Dalton's watchful eyes turned away. They recounted Ruth's saga with a mix of awe and trepidation, the Christmas morning theft of Lily, that innocent soul bartered for silver on the day of the Savior's birth, Ruth's deliberate stride into the main house, burning log clutched like a torch of Mosaic fury. Some hailed her as a vessel of justice, arguing Harrove deserved his losses, his grand home reduced to rubble, his security shattered, a tit-for-tat retribution mirroring the eye for an eye ethos of Leviticus. He stole her heart's light, they'd murmur, so she kindled a blaze to illuminate his sins. Others decried it as folly, fearing the ripple of suffering it unleashed tighter reins, harsher labors, as if Ruth's fire had scorched them all. Yet consensus held, Ruth chose agency in a world of chains, declaring through flames that if her daughter was forfeit, so too was Harrove's kingdom. It was a spiritually chilling affirmation of free will amid bondage, a reminder that even the oppressed could invoke divine scales. Samuel, Ruth's steadfast partner, became a ghost in his own life after her departure. His tall frame still toiled in the tobacco barns, hands methodically stripping leaves and suspending them in the dim, sap-scented interiors where shadows clung like regrets. But joy had fled him, no more did he whittle wood into whimsical forms, no songs escaped his lips under the sun's gaze. He isolated himself, his silence a fortress, and queries about Ruth met only averted eyes. When the Civil War erupted in spring 1861, whispers of freedom stirred the quarters, young men slipping away under moonless skies, chasing Union lines like pilgrims to a promised land. 2 succeeded, vanishing into the North's embrace, 3 were recaptured, their backs lashed as warnings. Samuel remained, his labor mechanical, expression a mask of stoic endurance, as if his spirit wandered elsewhere, tethered only by duty. By 1863, Dalton met his end at Gettysburg, his body felled amid the carnage, a poetic justice for the whip-wielder. Harrove, overwhelmed without his enforcer, grappled with the estate alone, the fields rebelling with failed harvests, workers growing bolder, their slowdowns daring reprisal as war's winds hinted at upheaval.
Spiritual symbolism abounded, the land's barrenness as a curse from Hosea, where unrighteousness yields no fruit.
By war's close in 1865, ruin enveloped all overgrown fields like untended vineyards in Isaiah, barns sagging like weary prophets, the new house already weathered, its paint peeling like shed illusions.
Emancipation's proclamation arrived like manna, and Samuel was among the first to depart, striding
off on a balmy May morning with naught but his garb and the unearthed wooden rabbit, a talisman of lost innocence, its smooth contours evoking Lily's absent laughter. He trekked north to Virginia, footsteps tracing uncertain paths, no map save the pull of possibility. Freedom's dawn was bittersweet, he sought Lily relentlessly, querying strangers about a light-skinned girl, 8 by then, sold in Richmond's maw in 1858. But war had ravaged records, ledgers torched, traitors slain or dispersed, trails dissolved like smoke. He settled in a Virginia hamlet, carpentry his trade, hands shaping wood as if seeking redemption in creation. No new unions, no offspring, solitude his companion, the rabbit perched on a shelf like a relic, handled in nocturnal vigils where memories flooded like Jordan's waters. Death claimed him in 1891 at 63, interred unmarked, his story fading like whispers in wind. Harrove clung to the estate until 1871, aged prematurely at 47, hair silvered, hands trembling, cough rattling like chains from inhaled smoke, a lingering judgment from that night. A heart failure felled him in his study, slumped over ledgers, pen clutched as if tallying final debts. Buried beside ancestors, his legacy entombed. Caroline and Sons fled to Charleston, she perished in 1875, William a childless clerk, James vanishing westward into obscurity. The land fragmented, sold piecemeal, new house raised in 1885, foundation swallowed by undergrowth, cemetery alone enduring like silent witnesses. Yet spirits stirred, the past unburied. In 1923, Robert Vance, World War I veteran from Pennsylvania, acquired 50 acres including the Grove, site of the original blaze. Limping from Argonne shrapnel, early 40s and solitary, he erected a modest dwelling by the creek, 2 rooms, stone hearth crackling warmly, porch overlooking vegetable plots and clucking hens. Initial peace reigned, he tilled soil, bartered produce, shunned society and church, content in isolation. But summer 1924 ushered anomalies, nocturnal awakenings to acrid smoke, not cozy wood, but caustic, like charring cloth or pitch. Searches yielded nothing, fireplace cold, stove dormant, yet the odor lingered, evoking war's horrors, perhaps psychic scars. Then footsteps paced the porch, deliberate and unseen, openings revealed emptiness, night air still. Faint singing followed, a woman's mournful melody, words elusive, perhaps ancestral tongues or distorted English, carrying sorrow's weight. Vance rationalized, mind's deceptions, war's echoes. Yet persistence mounted, a spiritually chilling haunting suggesting unrest souls demanding acknowledgement. Autumn brought the well digging, old source faltering, he excavated near the vanished main house. October's chill, shovel striking metal at 4 feet, an iron box, rusted, locked like a sealed confession. Hammer shattered the lock, inside, ledgers brittle as sins exposed, transactions of enslaved lives, names, ages, traits, prices. Jacob, 28, robust, $800, Sarah, 19, domestic, $600, Moses, 35, artisan, $900. Pages of commodified humanity, a ledger of damnation. Then, Lily, female, born March 12, 1857, light-skinned, sold December 25, 1858, $200.
Below, penciled addendum, he took my child. I took his house. We are even now.
Vance recoiled, comprehension dawning, the phenomena's source, Ruth's lingering spirit, her vengeance unbound by death, a chilling divine echo where justice transcends mortality.
He incinerated the ledgers in his hearth, flames consuming names like sacrificial offerings, hoping to purge the curse. Yet hauntings intensified, smoke, steps, songs unyielding. By spring 1925, Vance fled north, selling the land, silence shrouding his ordeal until 1954.
In a Harrisburg veteran's home, aged 73, he confided to a reporter, "No ghosts for me, but that land was wrong."
War's trick? Maybe. Couldn't stay. History persisted.
In 1968, Duke graduate Margaret Colby, 24, unearthed the tale in Randolph Courthouse steps, fires mentioned in 1859.
Inquiry sparking curiosity, Christmas arson, sold child. Delving, reports, deeds, censuses.
In misfiled archives, a letter from Reverend Thomas Whitley to Harrove, January 15, 1859, heavy heart.
Ruth said, "He took my child. I took his house. We are even now. But fear you are not even."
The words hung, spiritually ominous, implying imbalance, a curse enduring, divine ledger unbalanced.
Colby's thesis illuminated, but the estate's echoes whispered on, guilt's inheritance, sin's ripple, redemption elusive.
In Ruth's story, a chilling moral, some fires, kindled by injustice, burn eternally, purging or damning across generations. The Reverend's letter trembled in the dim light of the courthouse archive, its ink faded like whispers from a bygone era, yet its words carried the weight of prophetic doom.
"I fear that what you have sown, you will reap in ways you cannot yet imagine," Reverend Thomas Whitley had penned to Edmund Harrove on January 15, 1859, his script careful, almost pleading, invoking the biblical harvest of Galatians where deeds return manifold. He urged repentance, amends before the Almighty, but Harrove, ensconced in his rebuilt fortress of denial, likely cast it aside like a troublesome ledger entry. The letter, a spiritual indictment, symbolized the unheeded call to redemption in a land scarred by iniquity where slavery's chains were not just iron but soul-deep, forging cycles of guilt that span generations. Margaret Colby, the young Duke graduate student in 1968, felt a chill as she unfolded it in the basement's musty glow, fluorescent bulbs humming overhead like judgmental angels. At 24, her hands steady despite the archive's damp cold, she copied it meticulously, the paper's texture rough under her fingers, carrying the faint scent of aged dust and forgotten remorse. Her thesis, Fractured Families, the Impact of Child Sales on Enslaved Communities in North Carolina, 1820 to 1865, wove Ruth's tale into a tapestry of systemic horror, children bartered like lambs on altars of greed, families shattered as Cain slew Abel, but without divine mark for protection. Well-researched, with footnotes dense as thorn thickets, it argued for the psychological scars as eternal as original sin. Yet life intervened. Marriage in 1970 pulled her from academia, the unbound pages tucked away like a half-finished prayer. A copy languished in North Carolina State University's library archives, shelves groaning under tomes of silenced histories, gathering dust like manna uneaten in the wilderness. Decades passed, the 20th century yielding to the 21st, as the estate's ghosts whispered through overgrown pines, their needles sighing in winds that carried echoes of crackling flames. In 2003, Dr. Alan Pritchard, a historian in his 50s at a modest Virginia college, stumbled upon Colby's work amid stacks of yellowed manuscripts. His office, cluttered with maps and sepia photos, smelled of old books and black coffee, the air thick with the pursuit of buried truths. Pritchard, with wire-rimmed glasses and a gaze sharp as a prophet's vision, had devoted his career to enslaved resistance, subtle sabotages, escapes like Moses through the reeds, uprisings as fierce as David's sling. The Whitley letter struck him like lightning on Sinai. Here was retribution incarnate, a woman's fire as purifying as Elijah's chariot. He embarked on a 2-year odyssey, traversing dusty county offices where clerks eyed him curiously, their fluorescent-lit rooms echoing with the clack of keyboards over faded deeds. Property records unfolded like scrolls, tax ledgers noting the estate's decline, family trees branching into obscurity. He sought descendants, placing ads in local papers, their ink fresh against stories aged as wine. In South Carolina, plantation archives yielded not fires of war had consumed them, symbolic erasure mirroring Ruth's blaze.
But in North Carolina, connections emerged, oral histories passed like sacred oracles through families, voices trembling with ancestral weight. One interview etched itself into Pritchard's soul. Evelyn Morris, 91, in a Greensboro nursing home, her room bathed in afternoon sun filtering through lace curtains, the air scented with lavender and faint antiseptic. Seated by the window, her hands folded like a psalmist's, eyes clear as crystal streams, she recounted tales from her grandmother. "My great-great-grandmother was Dinah," she said, voice steady yet laced with sorrow. "Ruth's mother. Died young, but made Ruth vow, never let them break you. Never let them take it all." Evelyn's gaze drifted to the parking lot, cars gleaming like indifferent idols. When they stole Lily, Ruth honored that oath. She reclaimed what was hers in flames. Dread built as Pritchard probed Ruth's fate. "She perished in South Carolina," Evelyn murmured, "before war's end. But she dispatched a message, carried by wanderers between plantations like underground apostles, 'Tell Samuel I kept my promise.' The vow to Dinah, unbreakable spirit amid breakage." Pritchard's notes blurred with emotion. Here was psychological symbolism profound, resistance as spiritual armor, fire as baptismal purge against sin's stain. His 2005 article, Resistance and Retribution, The Harrove Estate Fire of 1858, graced the Journal of Southern History, its pages crisp, arguments tight as coiled springs. Academic ripples followed, citations in peers' works, but broader waters remained unstirred until 2017. Jessica Hang, a New York filmmaker in her 30s, eyes alight with purpose, discovered Pritchard's piece amid her research for a documentary on slavery's hidden rebellions. Her studio, cluttered with storyboards and glowing screens, hummed with the rhythm of editing software. Seeking narratives that shattered myths, resistance not just whips and runs, but quiet defiances like Ruth's Inferno, she phoned Pritchard. Hours dissolved in conversation, his voice gravelly over the line, sharing the letter, interviews, Evelyn's words. Fascination gripped Hang. This was no mere arson, but a mother's malediction, spiritually chilling in its echo of Job's trials and Esther's courage. Together, they journeyed to Randolph County in spring 2017, the air alive with blooming dogwoods, symbols of resurrection tainted by history's blood. The land, now a sprawling tobacco farm under Dale Hutchins, 60s, weathered face under a faded cap, granted access. Hutchins, hands calloused from soil, nodded solemnly, explore respectful like. With ground-penetrating radar humming like electronic divinations and UNC archaeologists in khaki, tools glinting, they mapped the grove, pines towering like ancient guardians, underbrush whispering secrets. Discoveries unfolded cinematically. Beneath soil layers, the main house's foundation emerged, bricks charred black as sin, cracked like fractured commandments. Deeper, a stone-lined pit under the study's presumed floor, a deliberate vault, hidden as Pharaoh's treasures. Inside, ledger fragments, pages scorched yet whispering names, prices, lives commodified. Brushes swept delicately, tweezers lifting relics under portable lights casting ethereal glows. Amid ashes, anomaly, a wooden rabbit, 3 inches, carved with loving precision, ears perked, body rounded, tail stubby. Hang cradled it, wood smooth against her palm, the air thick with revelation. "Samuel's for Lily," she breathed, voice hushed in awe. Pritchard nodded, eyes widening, but he carried it north post-emancipation. Implications thundered, Ruth's plan transcended rage. She infiltrated the study, torched ledgers to obliterate records of suffering, erasing sin's documentation like divine forgiveness withheld. The rabbit? Samuel's token, somehow procured, buried as marker, we endured. We matter. Spiritual undertones chilled, pit his tomb of greed, carving his resurrection symbol, Ruth's act a psychological sacrament against erasure. In documentary interviews, Pritchard reflected, face illuminated by camera lights, Ruth couldn't reclaim Lily, couldn't shatter chains, but she annihilated Harrove's testament to exploitation. The rabbit? Her eternal whisper, this for the stolen innocence. Heaven sees. The Fire That Ruth Set premiered at Tribeca 2018, screens flickering with archival reenactments, flames roaring, actors' faces etched in dread. Awards followed, Best Documentary, streaming deals reaching millions. Debates ignited, Ruth hero or tragic figure? Horror. Blaze justice's sword or desperation's spark? Historians parsed evidence, planned intent via ledger note, or coincidental relic?
Yet consensus, choice amid choicelessness, resistance's flame undimmed. The land slumbers now, pines swaying in breezes carrying faint smoke scents or imagination's trick.
Foundations lie buried, earth reclaiming like time's gentle judgment. In 2019, a granite marker rose roadside, 3 feet, bronze plaque gleaming, site of Harrove Estate, EST 1791. Destroyed by fire, December 25, 1858. A place of labor, loss, and resistance. In memory of Ruth, Lily, Samuel, and all whose names were lost. Hutchins welcomes pilgrims, flowers laid, wooden carvings, rabbits, birds, horses piled as offerings, symbols of innocence reclaimed. The rabbit resides in Raleigh's North Carolina Museum of History, glass encased with ledger shards and Whitley's letter copy. Exhibit, Resistance and Remembrance, light soft, visitors pausing in reflection, air-conditioned yet heavy with spiritual gravity. Ruth's grave eludes, records vanished in war's chaos, perhaps intentional oblivion, or survival under alias in Reconstruction's tumult. Lily's path dissolves, Trent's ledgers incinerated in 1862 Richmond blaze, ironic echo. Theories swirl, Richmond house servant, resold south, early death unnoted. DNA tests by descendants yield threads, but no not, curiosity lingers, dread of unknown fates. Harrove's tomb, overgrown mile distant, headstone tilted like leaning faith, descendants varied, some regretful, donating artifacts, others silent, shame's veil drawn. Patricia Harrovian, California-based, penned 2020 op-ed, can't undo ancestors' sins, but acknowledge, wrong. Support reparations. Sparks flew, praise for candor, critique for inaction. Dialogue endures, seeds sown reaping discourse. The 1858 fire, brief in hours, eternal in impact, consuming illusions of mastery over suffering. Didn't abolish bondage, restore Lily, erase all records, iron box survived, buried like Cain's mark. Yet scarred history, refusing fade, spiritually chilling reminder, sin's unrepented haunt. Post-documentary, Ruth's saga permeates, classrooms dissecting resistance, book clubs pondering morality, lectures invoking biblical parallels, sowing wind, reaping whirlwind. Annually, Christmas gatherings at the marker, descendants, historians, activists under winter skies, stars vigilant. Ceremony, words spoken, songs hummed, ancestral lullabies of rivers to freedom, silence profound. Flowers wilt, carvings weather, but remembrance persists. Ruth sought not mere vengeance, but eternal witness. She, Lily, existed, mattered. In flames, she forged legacy, dread of forgotten sins, curiosity for hidden truths, empathy for the oppressed, reflection on justice's price. What resonates in your soul from this chronicle? Was Ruth's blaze divine retribution or compounded sorrow? Hero defying evil, or desperation's echo? Share below, weave your thread into history's tapestry. If these shadows of the past grip you, subscribe, notify, share, more mysteries await unearthing. Until next revelation.